He would not kill. He refused to touch a gun. Yet when the world went to war, Desmond Thomas Doss became one of America's most unlikely war heroes. On Hacksaw Ridge, his courage outlasted the guns and saved 75 men, armed with nothing but faith, conviction, and a stretcher. He grew up in the hills of Lynchburg, Virginia. Born February 7, 1919 to a working-class family, he was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist, taught from childhood to revere the Bible, keep the Sabbath, and never take a life. A framed poster of the Ten Commandments hung in his home, and young Desmond took "Thou shalt not kill" to heart. Yet he was also intensely patriotic. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, Doss was working in a naval shipyard and could have taken a draft deferment. Instead, he felt called to serve. In April 1942, 23-year-old Doss enlisted in the US Army as a medic, determined to save lives rather than take them. Doss's moral stance quickly set him apart. At boot camp in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, he refused to pick up a rifle, not even for training. His fellow soldiers in the 77th Infantry Division mocked the Bible-reading Virginian. Officers threatened court-martial, deeming him mentally unfit for combat. Doss remained steadfast. "My duty," he said, "is to obey God and serve my country in that order." Over time, however, his competence won grudging respect. In 1944, he shipped out to the Pacific. On Guam and Leyte, while others took life, the medic was busy saving it. Running through enemy fire to reach fallen comrades, he earned 2 Bronze Stars for valor. Skeptics in his unit began to realize that the man who wouldn't carry a weapon was also their best chance of survival. By spring 1945, the war in the Pacific reached its climax on the island of Okinawa. The 77th Infantry Division faced its fiercest test at the 400-foot Maida Escarpment, a towering rock face the Americans called Hacksaw Ridge. This natural fortress was the linchpin of Japan's Shuri defensive line, manned by battle-hardened troops dug into caves and fortified positions. The escarpment had already cost hundreds of American lives. Now a private first class in Company B, 307 Infantry, Doss and his battalion scaled the cliff using cargo nets under constant fire. For weeks, brutal combat raged atop the ridge. Then on May 5th, 1945, a Saturday, Doss's Sabbath, the Japanese launched a massive counterattack. Overrun and outgunned, US troops were ordered to retreat off the ridge. Scores of men fell wounded across the exposed plateau. One man refused to leave. Desmond Doss stayed with the injured as Japanese forces swept forward. He had promised himself and God that he would never take a life, but nothing said he couldn't save one. Crawling from casualty to casualty, he lifted each soldier and carried or dragged them through mud and blood to the cliff's edge. With his bare hands, he rigged slings to lower man after man down the escarpment to safety. Enemy fire whizzed past, shells burst around him. Burst. Each time he delivered a wounded GI to the cliff's edge and sent them down, Doss paused to catch his breath and prayed, "Lord, please help me get one more." Then he turned back into the fight for the next man. He kept going, hour after hour into the night. By dawn, he had rescued 75 men from atop Hacksaw Ridge, many of them the very comrades who once had shunned him. Days later, the battle continued. On May 21st, during an assault near Shuri, a Japanese grenade tore into his legs. Doss bandaged his own wounds and waited 5 hours for help. When stretcher-bearers finally reached him under fire, he saw another man more critically hurt. Despite his injuries, he rolled off his stretcher and urged them to take the other soldier first. Alone again, attempting to crawl to safety, a sniper's bullet shattered his left arm. Doss fashioned a splint out of a rifle stock strapped to his useless arm. Cradling his broken limb, he then crawled some 300 yards over rough ground to the American lines. He would survive, but his war was over. In those grueling weeks on Okinawa, the conscientious objector from Virginia had demonstrated selflessness as great as any fighting man in the Pacific. News of Doss's heroism spread through the ranks. His name became a legend in the 77th Division. After Okinawa was secured, the wounded medic descended from Hacksaw Ridge to accolades from his brothers in arms. Those who once ridiculed him now stood in respect. "He was one of the bravest persons alive," admitted Captain Jack Glover, an officer who had initially wanted Doss out of the unit, and then to have him end up saving my life was the irony of the whole thing. For his valor, Desmond Doss received the nation's highest award. On October 12, 1945, President Harry S. Truman reached down to shake the slender corporal's hand and hung the Medal of Honor around his neck. Doss was the first conscientious objector ever to earn that medal. Truman, awed, told him, "I'm proud of you." In addition to the Medal of Honor, Doss received 2 Bronze Stars for his earlier actions on Guam and Leyte, and 3 Purple Hearts for the wounds he suffered in battle.